You stand before the mirror. The lighting is harsh, unforgiving, as it often is in the quiet moments before the day begins or after it has ended. You see a face. It is, by all accounts, your face. The familiar lines around the eyes, the curve of the mouth, the hair you styled just hours ago. All the data points match. The passport photo, the driver's license, the smiling images on your social media, they all confirm this identity. And yet, a chilling sense of dislocation permeates the air. You watch as this person, in the reflection, performs the morning ritual, brushing their teeth, washing their face. The movements are automatic, rehearsed, a ballet of mundane necessity. But you are not the dancer, you are in the audience, watching from a great, unbridgeable distance. Who is this person? This strangely familiar actor who carries your name, answers to your call, and sleeps in your bed. They navigate your world with a proficiency that is both impressive and deeply unsettling. They go to a job, engage in conversations, laugh at the right moments, show concern when it is expected. They have built a life, a respectable scaffolding of achievements, relationships, and responsibilities. A life that, from the outside, looks complete, coherent, perhaps even successful. But you, the silent observer behind the eyes, feel a profound and terrifying fraudulence in it all. You feel the constant, low-grade hum of a life being lived on autopilot. The dreams this person pursues feel borrowed. The passions they claim feel like echoes from a distant room. Their happiness is a well-rehearsed performance, their sorrow a socially acceptable script. This is the great, silent paradox of the modern soul, to be ever present in your own life, yet completely absent from it. To be the sole occupant of your body and mind, yet feel like a tenant in a house owned by a stranger. We are told from birth to be ourselves. But what if we have never been properly introduced? What if the self we present to the world is not a discovery, but an invention? A composite sketch assembled from the expectations of our parents, the demands of our culture, the fears of our ego, and the noise of the crowd. A meticulously crafted mask that has, over time, fused to our skin, suffocating the true face beneath. Have you ever felt the weight of that mask? The sheer exhaustion of holding it in place, day after day, smile after rehearsed smile. Is this feeling not the most terrifying loneliness of all? Not the absence of others, but the absence of oneself. To walk through years, decades even, executing a flawless imitation of a human being, while the authentic self remains dormant, trapped in the amber of unspoken desires and unrealized potential. Whose life are you actually living? When you choose a partner, are you satisfying a deep, intrinsic need for connection? Or are you fulfilling a societal expectation of what a relationship should look like? When you climb the corporate ladder, are you driven by a genuine ambition that sets your soul on fire? Or are you chasing a definition of success handed down to you by a world that doesn't know you at all? What happens when the applause for your performance dies down and you are left alone? In the dark with the stranger in the mirror, the silence that follows is not empty, it is screaming with questions you have spent a lifetime avoiding. This chasm between the actor and the observer is not a flaw in your character. It is not a sign of weakness or a simple case of existential ennui. It is a fundamental wound, a deep, psychic fissure that has been carved into us by the very architecture of our existence. It is the ghost in our machine, the silent puppeteer pulling the strings of a life that feels not quite our own. The ache of this internal division is a call, a desperate signal from a part of you that has been buried alive. It is a whisper that asks the most important question you will ever face, a question that once truly heard can either shatter you or set you free. To understand this phantom that haunts your every moment, to grasp why this stranger wears your face, we must first excavate the very ground upon which your identity was built. We must dig into the hidden soil of your past, into the psychological and philosophical bedrock that holds you captive and yet also holds the key. This excavation begins not in the present, but in the hazy, forgotten landscapes of your earliest moments. The ground upon which your identity was built is not your own native soil, it was imported. You did not spring forth from the earth fully formed, a self intact. You were born into a world of giants, of others a world of faces peering down into your crib, and it was in their eyes that you first saw yourself. Long before you had a name or a language, you learned a fundamental, terrifying truth: your existence required their validation. Their smile was your sun, their frown your winter. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre would later crystallize this experience with a chilling phrase: hell is other people. Not because they are inherently cruel, but because their gaze has the power to turn you from a living, breathing subject into a static, definable object. In the eyes of another, you cease to be a flow of pure experience and become something: a good baby, a quiet child, a smart student. You began to exist for them. This is the genesis of the stranger in the mirror. He is not an invader, he is a guardian, a construct born of necessity. The psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott called this entity the false self. It is the self you had to assemble to survive, to secure the love and approval essential for your very being. It learned to silence the messy, inconvenient, authentic impulses of your true self, the spontaneous gestures, the inconvenient emotions, the raw, untamed core of you in favor of a more compliant, predictable, and acceptable performance. This false self was a brilliant adaptation, a masterpiece of psychological engineering. It kept you safe. It earned you praise. It allowed you to navigate the complex social map of your family, your school, and your community. The psychoanalyst Carl Jung gave it another name: the persona, the mask worn by Roman actors to signify their role to the audience. A useful, even necessary, tool for social interaction. But here lies the insidious trap. What happens when the actor forgets he is wearing a mask? What happens when the false self, designed as a temporary shield, becomes the permanent fortress? You mistake the performance for the reality, the echo for the voice. The mask fuses to your skin, and you no longer remember the face beneath. The director of this lifelong performance is another internalized ghost, what Sigmund Freud termed the super. It is the disembodied voice of every authority figure you have ever known, the chorus of parents, teachers, priests, and cultural icons, all singing a ceaseless hymn of shoulds and should nots. It is the relentless inner critic that judges your every move against an impossible standard of perfection, a standard you did not create. It rewards your compliance with fleeting moments of pride and punishes your transgressions with the gnawing acid of guilt and anxiety. Your desires feel borrowed because so many of them are. They are the whispered commands of the superego, disguised as your own ambition. This internal regime, this government of ghosts, creates a vast and forbidden territory within you. Jung called this the shadow. It is the repository for every part of yourself that your persona and your superego deemed unacceptable: the anger, the wild creativity, the forbidden sexuality, the unproductive passions, the vulnerability. You did not destroy these parts of you. You merely exiled them. But they did not die. They live on in the dark, gathering strength, rattling the bars of their cage. They emerge in your dreams as monsters and phantoms. They leak out in slips of the tongue, in sudden, inexplicable moods, in the addictions you use to numb their cries. The stranger in the mirror feels like a fraud because he is living only half a life, while the other half, your shadow, presses against the veil of your consciousness, begging for integration, for a life it was never allowed to live. This internal conflict is the source of that deep, humming anxiety, the feeling of being perpetually at war with an enemy you cannot see, because that enemy is you. And our modern world has become the perfect amplifier for this schism. The philosopher Michel Foucault described the panopticon, a prison where a single guard can watch all inmates without them knowing if they are being watched. This forced the prisoners to internalize the guard's gaze, to police themselves. Today, social media, corporate culture, and the relentless pressure to curate a personal brand have turned our entire society into a digital panopticon. We are all both prisoner and guard, endlessly performing for an unseen audience, terrified of stepping out of line, of revealing a single, authentic, uncurated flaw. We manicure our personas, filter our realities, and in doing so, we starve the very soul we claim to be expressing. This, then, is the hidden architecture of your internal prison, a compliant false self. Your public-facing persona is directed by the internalized rules of the superego, all in a desperate attempt to satisfy the gaze of the other and navigate the panopticon of modern life. All the while, the vibrant, chaotic, and authentic power of your true self and your shadow is banished to the dungeon of your unconscious. You are not living a life, you are managing a crisis of identity so profound, so deeply buried, that you have come to mistake the feeling of imprisonment for the feeling of safety. But this arrangement, this psychic bargain you made long ago, comes at an unbearable cost. It is a cost that is not paid in money or status, but in something far more precious. It is a cost measured in lost vitality, in silent desperation, and in the slow, creeping horror of a life unlived. And its consequences radiate outwards, silently poisoning everything you touch. The poison radiates slowly, not with the sharp burn of an acute toxin, but with the creeping, systemic numbness of a chronic illness. You don't collapse overnight. Instead, a subtle grayness begins to tint the edges of your world. This is the first unseen consequence, the slow death of feeling. Living through the persona is an act of constant, low-grade performance, and it is utterly exhausting. It severs the wires that connect you to genuine emotion. Joy becomes less a spontaneous eruption and more a quiet, cognitive acknowledgement that something good has happened. Love becomes less a terrifying, exhilarating surrender and more a comfortable, contractual arrangement of mutual support. Your life becomes a landscape painted in muted tones, and you may not even notice the color draining away until you encounter a work of art, a piece of music, or a sunset so magnificent that it momentarily breaks the spell, and you feel an ache, a phantom limb of a capacity for awe you have long since amputated. This is the state of anhedonia, the clinical term for the inability to feel pleasure. But it is more than that. It is a spiritual anesthetic, deadening you to the exquisite highs and devastating lows that constitute a life truly lived. This emotional void inevitably seeps into your relationships. How can another person truly see you when you have never revealed your true face? You extend your persona like a handshake, and they, in turn, offer theirs. You fall in love not with a person, but with a meticulously curated representative, a diplomatic envoy from the sovereign nation of their own hidden self. You build a life with a mask, and you wonder why you feel so profoundly alone in the dead of night, lying next to another sleeping body. The true tragedy is that you will attract partners who are perfectly suited for your false self, but catastrophically mismatched for your soul. They will validate the actor, but starve the person. When the pressures of life inevitably cause the masks to crack in moments of grief, failure, or exhaustion, you look at each other and see strangers. The ensuing disillusionment is not a sign that you chose the wrong person, but a sign that a person was never truly part of the equation to begin with. Professionally, this schism breeds a unique kind of burnout. It is not the simple fatigue of hard work. It is the soul-crushing exhaustion of anti-work, of laboring against your own nature. You climb a ladder that is leaning against the wrong wall. Each promotion, each raise, each accolade feels hollow because it is a reward for the persona's performance, not a recognition of the true self's purpose. This creates a state of profound cognitive dissonance, the mental stress experienced when holding to contradictory beliefs. I am successful, your mind says, looking at your title and your bank account. I am dying, your soul whispers from the dungeon. To resolve this unbearable tension, your mind performs a desperate act of self-deception. It begins to change your beliefs to match your actions. You convince yourself that you are passionate about quarterly reports, that this sterile ambition is your authentic drive. You use confirmation bias as a shield, surrounding yourself with articles, podcasts, and colleagues who celebrate this very path, creating a self-validating echo chamber that drowns out the whispers of your own spirit. On a neurological level, you are physically wiring this prison into your brain. Every time you swallow your true opinion in a meeting, every time you feign interest you do not feel, every time you say yes when your body screams no, you strengthen the neural pathways of the false self. Your brain, an organ optimized for efficiency, makes this performance smoother, more automatic, more you. Authenticity, in contrast, becomes a neurologically expensive and unfamiliar act. To break free feels like trying to write with your non-dominant hand, awkward, slow, and profoundly unnatural. Your very biology begins to conspire against your liberation. And this personal tragedy, when multiplied by millions, becomes a cultural sickness. A society of actors creates a culture of profound conformity. We consume not to fulfill needs, but to signal status to other personas. We vote not from conviction, but from tribal affiliation. We fear genuine debate because a challenge to our ideas feels like a threat to our very identity, the fragile, constructed identity of the false self. Our institutions, from corporations to governments, are designed to interface with this predictable, compliant actor, not with the messy, unpredictable, authentic human being. They are systems built by masks, for masks. But a structure built on a lie is inherently unstable. The pressure builds. The exiled shadow does not weaken in the darkness. It consolidates its power. Your true self does not die. It waits. And then something cracks. Perhaps it manifests as a sudden, overwhelming panic attack in the middle of a grocery store. Perhaps it's a diagnosis of a stress-related illness, your body finally screaming what your mind refuses to hear. Or perhaps it's the classic midlife crisis, where the carefully constructed stage set of your life is suddenly torn down by an inexplicable, primal urge to do something, anything authentic. We are taught to see these moments as breakdowns, as failures of the system. But what if this is profoundly wrong? What if the breakdown is not the problem, but the beginning of the cure? What if the crisis is not a sign that you are broken, but a sign that your soul is finally, violently, attempting a prison break? The shattering of the facade is not an ending, it is a terrifying, chaotic, and absolutely necessary beginning. It is the first brutal act of reclaiming a life that was stolen from you long before you knew it was gone. The crisis arrives. The carefully constructed world of the stranger in the mirror begins to tremble and crack. Your first instinct, the instinct conditioned by a lifetime of compliance, is to panic, to grab the psychological spackle and glue, to frantically patch the fissures, to restore the old order, to make the screaming stop. Every force in your life, your worried family, your confused friends, The baffled inner voice of your superego will urge you toward this path. They will tell you to get a grip, to be reasonable, to go back to being the person they understand, the mask they find comfortable. And here, at this critical juncture, you are presented with a choice. You can obey, and in doing so, reinforce the prison walls for good. Or you can perform the most radical, counterintuitive act of your entire life. You can let it all fall apart. The path to freedom is not paved with restoration. It is cleared by demolition. You must not run from the ruins of your false self. You must become an archaeologist of them. You must sift through the rubble with your bare hands and dare to ask what truths lie buried beneath. The great secret is this: you do not break free by finding yourself. You break free by losing yourself, by courageously and methodically dismantling the imposter you have mistaken for you. This is not a search party. It is a controlled demolition. The power to do this does not come from acquiring something new, but from reclaiming something ancient that has been exiled from your own kingdom. Your first act of rebellion is to turn and face the monster in your dungeon, your shadow. For decades, you have treated your negative emotions, your anger, your envy, your grief, your fear as enemies to be suppressed. This is the strategy of the false self. The strategy of the liberator is to see them as messengers. You must learn to invite your shadow to the table and listen, without judgment, to its story. Do not act on its impulses, but honor its wisdom. What is your rage trying to defend? A boundary that has been violated 1,000 times. What is your envy pointing to? A deep, authentic desire your persona deemed too foolish or ambitious to pursue. What is your sorrow mourning? The profound loss of your own authentic life. In the leaden weight of your shadow lies the alchemical gold of your vitality. To integrate it is to cease the civil war inside you, to reclaim the vast energy you have been wasting on self-suppression, and to become whole and therefore formidable. Next, you must master the art of the sacred no. The persona is a creature of yes. It says yes to the extra project, yes to the social engagement that drains you, yes to the relationship that deadens you. It is a pathological people pleaser. Your liberation begins the moment you utter your first, trembling, authentic no. A no not born of spite, but of radical self-preservation. Each time you say no to a demand that violates your soul, you are casting a sacred yes to your own emergent being. This will feel like an act of betrayal. Others, who have benefited from your compliance, will react with confusion, anger, or guilt-tripping. See their resistance not as a condemnation, but as a compass. It is proof that you are finally leaving the territory of their expectations and entering the sovereign land of yourself. This is the journey the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche described as the 3 metamorphoses. First, the spirit is a camel, patiently bearing the load of tradition and the thou shalts of the soup. But to find freedom, the camel must go into the desert and become a lion, a fierce warrior who confronts the great dragon named Thou Shalt. The lion's sacred mission is to say no, and to clear a space for its own will. This is the demolition phase, the tearing down of the old laws. You must become the lion. You must wage this war, but the lion, for all its power, cannot create. Therefore, the final transformation is to become a child, a symbol of new beginnings, of innocence, of creativity, and of a sacred, playful yes to life on its own terms. You cannot get to the child without first becoming the lion. Start with small rebellions. Intentionally choose manageable discomfort. Break the neurological wiring of the persona. Wear the clothes that feel like you, even if they feel too bold. Order the strange dish on the menu. Take a different route home. Spend an hour in silence, listening not to the noise of the world, but to the subtle signals of your own body, the tightness in your chest, the knot in your stomach. Your body is the ultimate repository of truth. It cannot be conditioned to lie as effectively as the mind. It has been sending you memos for years that your brain has marked as spam. It is time to open your mail. This is not just self-help. This is a revolution fought on the battlefield of your own consciousness. The power you are unlocking was never out there. It has been within you all along, a sleeping giant. The crisis did not create this power, it simply, violently, kicked open the door to its chamber. Your task now is not to fear the giant, but to learn its name. You have waged the war. You have become the lion and faced the dragon of thou shalt. You have sifted through the rubble of the persona you once were, learning to hear the wisdom in your own exiled darkness. You have practiced the sacred art of no, and in the clearing you have so violently and bravely created, you stand, waiting for the final unveiling. Waiting to finally meet this true self you have sacrificed everything to find. You lean in, expecting to see a finished masterpiece, a radiant, perfect being emerging from the stone, the reward for your heroic struggle. And here, in this sacred silence, is where the final, most powerful realization of all will either crush you or grant you wings. There is nothing there. There is no core. There is no static, pre-written, essential self waiting to be discovered. The treasure chest is empty. The throne is vacant. The entire quest to find yourself was based on a flawed map, a beautiful and necessary lie. You were searching for a noun, an object, a fixed point of light in the darkness. But the soul is not a noun, it is a verb. It is not a thing to be found, but a process to be engaged in. It is not a discovery, but a creation. The agony of your past life was not that the mask was fake, but that it was finished. It was a statue, rigid and unchanging, while the universe, and your own deepest nature, is a river of ceaseless flow. The conflict that nearly tore you apart was the friction between this static object you thought you were and the dynamic, creative force you have always been. The stranger in the mirror was a stranger because he was a photograph from the past, trying to dictate the terms of your living present. This is the ultimate freedom, the one that lies on the other side of terror. You are not defined. You are not a finished story. You are the author, holding a pen over a blank page, and the ink is the blood of this very moment. Your true self is not a pre-existing identity, but the simple, terrifying, glorious act of choosing. It is the choice, right now, to act in alignment not with who you were or who you should be, but with the values that resonate from the deepest, quietest part of you. Authenticity is not a state of being, it is a direction of travel. It is the courage to be the dance rather than the dancer, the painting rather than the painter. It is the continuous act of becoming. All your past struggles suddenly become clear. They were the desperate attempts of a creator being forced to live inside a finished, and therefore dead, creation. The question that has haunted you, who am I, was the wrong question all along. It presumes a static answer. The real question, the one that ignites life, is who will I choose to become now? In this breath, in this action, in this word. Life does not begin when you find yourself. That is the myth of the false self. Life begins the moment you accept that you are unfindable and that this is your greatest power. It is the moment you stop seeking an identity and start exercising your freedom to create one. The fear of this emptiness gives way to the exhilaration of pure potential. You are no longer burdened with the impossible task of living up to a fixed ideal. You are blessed with the sacred responsibility of choosing your own. So look in the mirror now. The face that stares back is no longer a stranger. But it is not a familiar, comfortable friend either. It is pure possibility. It is the face of the Creator, tired from the battle, but alive, truly alive for the first time. The voice you hear is not the echo of your parents or the whisper of society. It is the sound of your own becoming. Your own soul is a kind of abandoned place, a discovery island overgrown with the vines of fear and expectation, a river country whose joyful waters have long been diverted. The work is not to restore it to exactly what it once was, but to explore its ruins, to understand its history, and to build something new and vital and true upon that sacred ground. This is the great work. This is the call. Do not spend another day of your life as a tourist in your own existence. The gates to the forgotten park are open. Have the courage to walk through them. Have the courage to turn the key, to face the emptiness, and to begin the endless, beautiful, terrifying work of creation.